Hello, today we're going to be roasting and reacting to the Linus Tech Tips Server Room Update 2023. Let's get started.
You guys have been telling us for years that our infrastructure, the servers and the networking gear that our 20 video editors, not to mention the other 90 employees, rely on, is a little jank. You weren't wrong then, and realistically, you're probably not going to be wrong a few years from now. But we haven't been standing still, and in the last year alone, we've effectively replaced or...
First of all, wow, keeping those servers, which do pack a little bit of weight on the top shelf, personally not the best idea, but different people have their different storage needs.
Rebuilt every single server in this building, making...
Aww, I recognize the top one is that Minecraft server they built.
them faster, better, more reliable, cooler,
Cool how they
far
did the
less
fan grill.
power hungry. In fact, we've done so much that most of the servers you've ever seen on camera are in this graveyard right in front of me, which means...
Pausing it right here, these are four 45 drives storinators. I recognize the name as the Delta 1 and 2 and 6, and I'm not sure what that second one is. Those are what they used as their old vault storage. Man, 45 drive servers are my dream server.
It's high time to give you guys a full update on all of it, including some brand new gear that is unlike anything we've ever shown you before. First up is the main server room at the OG office, where you can see there's been some serious server
Wow, that's a lot of blank space there. I counted like that's like 12 rack units or 12 U of space in that middle that's available. Wow. Pausing it right here as well, we can see at the top, those are patch panels that those cables are coming out of. I personally would put the switch directly above it or below it and have some small 6-inch patch cables in between. With their being so high bandwidth, using 25 plus gig, I imagine that's going to be a little bit different for them because I'm not as familiar with that high speed of networking. But yeah, I would shorten some of those runs up. But otherwise, great cable management on the front.
shrinkage. There was one point during the vault recovery process where we literally only had 3 rack units left, and now this is only about half full. But
Half empty to me.
the important stuff is actually at the back, where our old pfSense router has been replaced, or rather it's pulling duty as a Steam.
This particular Steam cache that they're using, this Super Micro, is a great server. It just packs a lot of ports. It has 10 gig ports, 1 gig ports, a couple of SFP plus. It would make a really nice pfSense box.
Steam cache now. Our Steam cache used to be in a VM, but we were having issues with it.
It'd be like weird performance things where it'd be like 10 gig download and it'd be like 1 gig. And then 10 gig
Sometimes
again and 1
that
gig.
happens.
So we're back on bare metal now, which is fine because we upgraded this thing anyway, only to discover that pfSense didn't run on the new box. This Super Micro 1U.
That pfSense is still an issue. There's a way that you can do it. You can get pfSense Plus for free in some configurations. I would, at least personal home lab, if I dealt with that high bandwidth, I would use a USB dongle just to get connected and then upgrade to pfSense Plus.
Is super cool. It's got
As of end of April 2023, they should be releasing the new version pretty soon.
25 gig networking on
25
board,
gig networking.
except no drivers in pfSense.
Yeah, it's running a really old FreeBSD version.
Fortunately, OpenSense is a fork of pfSense that gets updated way more frequently. Now, that could be a double-edged sword. Your organization might prefer the slow, plodding approach to updates, but
I personally like being a little bit behind schedule myself, as long as the hardware works, but they have a different need which requires high bandwidth.
we live on the bleeding edge where we love that we've got support for our 25 gig networking in here, and you update it like a couple weeks after the new...
Yeah, I usually wait like a month.
Pausing right here, cable management definitely in the back of a server rack is a little bit harder. They've done the best that they could, though. Ooh, those are nice bundles at the top. But I see that there's one on the inside of the rack and one on the outside of the rack. I'm not sure if there's space up there. I can't really tell for it, but...
After a big release before updating.
And it's been rock solid for us.
0 issues.
If we wanted to go back to PFC...
And this rack they've been using for about 8.5 years, they said. So, like... And they recabled it a couple of years ago.
Since though we totally could, is what I would say, except they still don't support this thing.
No, they don't.
The other changes back here are not so much hardware, but rather topology. We've still got that awesome Dell 100 gig switch, but
100 gig switch. 6 ports of it are 100 gig, but 25 gig on the other ports. Wow.
Now we're wired directly into all of our editors and
So looking at that there, they use the 25 gigs, go to the editor stations and the ingest stations. The other goes to the servers, which does make sense to use a higher bandwidth for servers.
ingest stations via fiber.
25
so we're running 25 gig, and we're using the 100 gig ports to connect to each.
So they're doing something that's very smart with this method, which they're going to talk about in a second. They're using the Dell switch, the bottom Dell switch, as an aggregation switch to have the other connections coming from. And they're using that as like the master switch, and then the leaf switch is those lesser capacity 10 gig switches. And that's a very good approach to how you should do multiple switches.
Of our downstream switches, where we used to have it going from one to the other, to the other, to the other.
This, it works pretty well, but as they're about to say, if like you take down the top switch, all switches will go downstream. What you can as well do is you can have a separate loop, a second loop going pretty much the quote opposite direction. And with spanning tree protocol, it would block communication. But if one of the switches dies, it could make up a route with an alternate route.
Which, to their credit, these Dell 48 port 10 gig switches, other than updates, have they gone down at all?
I've never had an issue with any of these 3 Dell switches ever. They would have 100% uptime if we didn't update them.
Shout out Ubiquiti as well, though. We've been really happy with their PoE switches. This
Ubiquiti switches are amazing. Let's go back a couple of seconds and get the model number.
It would have 100% uptime if we didn't update them.
Shout out Ubiquiti as well.
Those are the Enterprise XG24 is what I would consider my dream switch. All 24 ports can do either 10 gig, 5 gig, 2.5 gig, 1 gig, 100 megabit, and probably 10 meg too, don't know. 2 all the standard. And the other one below it, they use as a PoE switch, I assume for like cameras, access points of that nature.
Well, though, we've been really happy with their PoE switches. This one right here runs all of our cameras, all of our Wi-Fi access points. Right. And then this guy up here was actually added when we acquired the unit on, I guess this runs to both other sides, right?
Yeah, 101 and 105, so that's the shop and like where the WAN show set is.
And this one's got a 25 gig link to our 100 gig switch. Now, oh, there is one other new piece of hardware. We have an NVR back here now.
Yeah, we have 2, actually. We previously only had 1, but we had so many cameras that it was like starting to like cause weird performance issues. So we split them out into 2. Ubiquiti keeps telling me that they're gonna add NVR stacking where you can combine them together.
I personally am not a big fan of Unify NVRs because you are locked into their cameras. Personally, I prefer Blue Iris, and we're going to learn more about that in what I'm planning for future videos. But I like it. It works for them pretty well if you have all their ecosystem and can get a hold of their products.
But for now, I have to like click between the...
We're really happy overall, though.
Yeah.
Big Brother's watching.
Yeah.
Wait, I missed something else. What's this cloud key doing up here?
Well, it used to be on this side. Don't you remember?
Oh, don't we have a Dream Machine here? I have one in my house.
No.
Oh.
OpenSense.
Right.
I can't remember why.
I use pfSense myself. That's the one thing I really wish, is that there was a way to control third-party routers, I guess some kind of API, but I can dream.
I thought you can run this in a VM now. Okay, all right.
It was. And then the database corrupted, so we couldn't adopt anything properly. So instead of just re-adopting all of the like 40 switches we had, I was like, what if we just transfer to a cloud key? And it fixed it. So it's on a
You can force adopt devices if you know the SSH login. I assume that they had an earlier backup on the cloud key that worked, but always back up your configuration files.
cloud key now. Again, like it was before. Love doing work twice.
The other thing that particularly the Europeans have chirped us about in here is our use of
nice
120
UPS.
volt power in a server room. And while the output on this does say only 110 and 120 volt as the options, it's got two 120 volt phases. So if you pair it with the right PDUs or power distribution units, you can totally do 208 volt, which we're now doing thanks to these super cool PDUs from Triplite. They're networked. So you can not only monitor the total power usage, but you can actually switch off individual outlets. Say,
That's pretty cool.
if a network device became unresponsive.
PDUs are not something I'm quite as familiar with, and that battery, ooh, that's a beautiful battery backup they have.
You can even create automations for it. The main benefit of switching to 208 volt is efficiency. You've probably seen in power supply marketing materials that there will be two lines for the efficiency curve, one for 120 volt and one for 200 plus. And the reason for that is the higher voltage allows your power supply to operate more efficiently. It's exactly the same for servers. So we dropped our power consumption in here by about 10% just from that changeover. That means that combined with the server consolidation we've done and the additional battery units that we've added to our 9PXM, this Eaton UPS can run for almost an hour with the power out completely, which seems to come up around here a lot. Now let's talk about...
I personally go for about 30 minutes of runtime. My home lab, if the power's out for more than 5 minutes, I issue a evacuate home lab command that will shut down all VMs gracefully. That's an interesting screenshot gold right there. I'm going to go ahead and move myself up to the upper corner as well.
About the great consolidation after we talk about our sponsor.
We're back from our sponsor spot here. Make sure you support their sponsor if you do support their sponsor, and any others. It's always great to support our creators. I'm not sponsored yet, but let's see how this goes.
To have 5 45 drive storinators.
Ooh, 5 storinators, and those were the ones that we saw from a few moments ago in the video. They used, I believe, either Gluster or Zeph to get that combined into one physical, but the thing is, when you get started and you've been around for the years that you've been, you start off with one, you fill that up, you build a second, and you build up from there. And the method that they're about to talk about is much better, because when they want to expand, they can just add another VDEV, add more VDEVs. So it's something that you gain in experience with well planning.
Taking up half our rack, holding about 60 drives each. We now have 3 of these Supermicro JBODs in what we call the Mother Vault. Each of these holds up to 90 drives, and then we've got this single AMD EPYC Milan head unit that uses 2 EPYC Milan.
Let's take a look at the specs on here. 232 cores, so that's what, 64 cores, 128 threads, a terabyte of RAM. Wow. Wow. They have 120 terabytes. That's pretty much double the storage that I have in my largest array just for caching, and 2.5 petabytes of assorted drives for storage. Wow. Beautiful specs. And man, gotta love Supermicro too.
On 32-core CPUs, and then it uses external SAS connectors to attach to the JBODs. Right now, we've only got a single JBOD attached to each of the SAS HBAs in here, but theoretically, nothing would prevent us from adding another, I don't know, like 3 of these once we clear out Clover Server. This is running ancient hardware. It's a Xeon 20.
I'm going to move myself out of the way a little bit here. The Xeon Ancient, Not sure how that old that is off the top of my head, but this is still very well spec'd. 256 gigs of RAM, again, large amounts. They used this old hypervisor, and 28 terabytes of NVMe storage.
2699 V4. I mean, that's 28 cores, but they are flippin' slow. And we're using this for all of our virtual machines, which, do we even have that many virtual machines? What else we got going on in here?
Not really. This one's being deprecated soon in place of Clayton server up here, which is running Proxmox instead. That will be where all of our VMs move in the long term.
Does that mean I can take this CPU for my home server?
That's
sure.
CPU.
Our Clayton Proxmox server doesn't really run a lot of VMs.
I personally use XCP-ng as my hypervisor, as they're talking about here. Just a matter of personal preference. A lot of people use and love Proxmox.
To be honest, we have a Parsec relay, which makes Parsec run a little bit faster when you have a bunch of different users. We have a couple VMs for the labs team, and then the Steam cache was on it, but then, like I said, it kind of had issues. So, yeah, 64 core Epic, 24 bays for 4 drives and like 3 VMs.
Wait, we didn't mention the Mother Vault is running TrueNAS.
Yeah, I mean, basically all of our servers run TrueNAS now.
Shout out TrueNAS, shout out ZFS,
TrueNAS.
and shout out Wendell from Level 1 Techs.
Hey.
It's not like the Vault data is essential. That's why it wasn't redundant then, and it's still not redundant now. But it's a super nice to have, and thanks to Wendell, we managed to get back, what, like 98.5% of what we lost?
Most of it, and to be fair, I haven't run into a situation yet where someone's been like, hey, I need this file and I can't find it. So I think it's
Freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And it's wild being in Windows Explorer, seeing this single folder,
Wow. That's a lot of storage.
single machine that now has
But they're gonna have to
everything,
expand it pretty
2.4 petabytes or whatever. Unbelievable. Speaking of unbelievable, we got hated on a fair bit for this thing, and you were right.
Dual 64 core epics, that's 128 cores, 256 threads. That has more thread counts than my bed.
But not about the performance.
Yeah, this thing has been crazy reliable, crazy fast. It's basically the bee's knees. I've only really run into one issue, and this was recent. The day of the hackening. One of the drives decided to shut off.
And if you want to change out an M.2 drive that's loaded onto a carrier card, that's loaded into a module thing, that's loaded into a server, it's a bit of a pain in the butt. Especially because we didn't have the foresight to write down the serials and which carrier card they were installed in.
Absolutely zero idea which drive it is.
Oh my god, that's what you did? So what we ended up doing to restore the array's integrity is putting a mismatched 7 terabyte
Just do it right the
Kioxia
first
drive
time. Please
into one of the
document
front
everything,
NVMe
exactly
bays,
the serial numbers.
Jake.
Yeah.
And the plan is apparently to do something about the serviceability of it soon.
On that note, make sure as well, as I was saying, to document everything and to be prepared for this. Always have a cold spare. I'd say setting right near the thing, ready to go in case of a failure.
PM.
Oh, he's holding his little controller that he uses for his teleprompter.
It hasn't needed any servicing, right?
Oh
to be
my
fair,
God.
when I restarted the server, the drive came back online and has been online since.
We do have some ideas for improving the serviceability. We found out that you can get U.2 to M.2 carrier cards.
I've been wanting to look into U.2 myself, but I haven't found any good hotspot bays or anything to do that with.
So we could actually just take all those internal SSDs, load them into the U.2 slots in the front. Oh, I guess we'll have to add more modules for
Or
that.
maybe use a different server.
Or maybe use a different, oh, okay. So new Wannick is coming soon then?
Wannick 4.
Wannick 4.
And we could use those new Sabrent drives. They're sending over 22 of their wild 8 terabyte
terabyte
Rocket 4
drives.
Plus drives so that we can try them out with that crazy 21 by M.2 carrier card that you probably saw in the news. So, wait, no, I am not thinking we use those carrier cards.
Hey, you were the one that brought that up.
No, we're not.
We just put one. It's the one card server. It's got 160 terabytes on one card.
Yeah, entire Wannick server in an Intel NUC.
Yeah.
No. I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
It's not that
No, wait,
stupid.
I'm the one that's supposed to say your ideas are stupid. That's stupid.
It's not that stupid.
It's stupid.
You like it.
I don't. Not after that.
Meanwhile, in Unit 101, where all the inventory and logistics department used to be, but now you'll find only our makeshift short circuit set, we've removed the server rack out.
So they removed the rack. I would recommend putting like about a 8U, 12U wall mount cabinet just for the networking equipment. This cable management they're about to mention could be a lot better, especially with it using short patch cables.
Outright, because we can't have servers sitting here next to where we're trying to film. Instead, we've got this simple 6-rack unit wall mount here that's going to hold our 2 network switches that handle.
They have 1, 2, 3 of the wall mount racks here. I'm actually not sure if the one that the UPS is on it has one, but it could be very simplified on this. But that one switch is kind of a deep switch, so I'd question that a little bit.
All the network connectivity down here and upstairs. We've also got a UDM Pro down here. That's the router for our secondary backup internet connection. It's not nearly as fast. It's 1 gig instead of 10 gig, but realistically, most of what we're doing, we don't need.
Most of the time we just use it for like testing a router on short circuit, so.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
I would, in OpenSense, have a failover for the other connection. So it'd be a very seamless transition. However, I can see why keeping it separate.
Now, you might have noticed that this looks pretty okay. This looks extremely not okay.
Whoa.
This is very much a work in progress. These patch panels are gonna come down here, and then presumably at some point we're gonna shorten these runs, maybe?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
oh yeah.
Yeah, because they're long enough to go into a rack.
Well, these will get replaced with little, like those little ultra thin 6-inch cables from Infinite Cables. Shout out Infinite Cables. Thanks for these things.
And speaking of, shout out Ubiquity for this access point.
Yeah, that's
definitely. Oh my God, is this the actual access point for
No,
here?
no, no. That's
Okay.
just like the backup connection one.
The only other noteworthy thing here is our UPS. This is to ensure that not only is our main internet connection battery backed up, but also our secondary one. That way, in the event that we lose power to the building outright, the WAN show can continue, as you guys actually saw not that long ago.
That time we had to run it on jackeries because we actually ran out of backup battery. So we bought a second battery pack that just needs to get put on here. It's sitting over there. It'll get on there. We got to be able to do WAN show for like at least 2 hours.
Yeah, on battery.
5 now. 5 hours. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Moving over to the lab, the biggest change is probably the complete removal of Windows from our infrastructure. Get it? There used to be
But
a window here.
Yeah.
But because of all the sound bleed from the servers next door, the poor social media team who's moving in here was gonna develop tinnitus.
Social media team?
Isn't that who's coming in here?
Oh, I thought this is my server room.
No.
What?
The server room's over here, and now it is properly sealed.
That's just
so let's
the
head in there.
network room. This is this.
No! Honestly though, removing the window and finishing up the drywall, it's not really enough, and it's especially not gonna be enough with some of the gear that we're putting in here. So, we're doing it again, but this time better.
Way better.
Hanging insulation on the wall of the server room.
Yeah, this time we're gonna use this cool product called Sonapar, which is like a recycled wood panel.
man, that'd be pretty cool.
They're like $30 for a 4x8 sheet, which is really cheap for sound isolation. And then we're gonna put Rockwall on top of it with these cool adapters that Dan made.
In fairness to me, the original solution was messy, but darn it,
They make a video about that.
did it ever work?
Yeah, it does work really well.
I took so much flack for that.
I don't even know if Sonapar existed then.
Yeah,
And to be fair, nails is way easier than 3D printing hundreds of little brackets.
yeah.
Yeah.
I did that in a weekend.
Yeah, we're gonna put the Duvetine on with magnets this
I
time.
probably took like 3 months off my life with the amount of fibers I inhaled that weekend.
Yeah, that's okay. You got good life insurance.
Man, this is where you can see the difference between us 8.5 years ago architecting this stuff and then kind of upgrading piecemeal as we go.
When you upgrade hardware, when you upgrade your rack, you get a lot of technical debt, but I agree this looks very nice here. Short patch cables, they're pretty much using one brand of equipment, which keeps everything nice and unified.
And when we build something from scratch with all the knowledge we've gained since then, Here's where our internet connection comes in. We did end up having to go for the expensive link over to the...
They had to go for the expensive one. That was pretty cool how they ran the cables between the two offices. But looking at that there, the cabling's beautiful. They have one unplugged, I see on the patch panel number 5.
The other building, but hey, now that the whole writing team's here and the lab is here, we definitely do need it.
That microtech at the top is probably ISP equipment.
And then we've got these 100 gig links that break out into 425s that go to these 10 gig switches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. Woo!
We might need one more too.
What?
The intention is for every single connection in this building to be 10 gig. Obviously not cameras and like APs and stuff.
Yeah. Everything else is running off of these Enterprise 48 switches from Ubiquiti. These are super cool. They're 48 ports, 2.5 gig, and they do PoE. So these will do all the cameras and access points here, which access points in particular now actually can use 2.5 gig uplinks. They're so freaking fast.
And we put those Wi-Fi 6E Enterprise APs everywhere in this building. At least with what's done so far.
We have ripping fast Wi-Fi here. There's more than just networking over here though. We've got the NVR Pro from Ubiquiti. This is handling all of the cameras in this building. And you may recognize this as the Storinator that 45 Drive sent over for our Vault recovery. Well, now it's pulling completely different duty as our Annydale server. So this
footage dump and backup server, only 32 cores in that. 0.5 terabyte of RAM, wow, and 24 12 terabyte drives. It's like 300 terabytes, I think, of storage. Wow.
This is our footage dumping ground and is one of the backup targets for our main video editing server, Wanik. It's over at the lab now for more physical separation, so that way
3-2-1 rule, and it's great that they have a high speed point-to-point between the two.
If one of the buildings were to burn,
but I would say that having another off-site backup away from, I guess, the physical zip code or the complex would be a better idea too.
Down in the past, they were just two separate units of the same building. Now they are physically separate buildings. Probably the coolest thing over here though is this, our first attempt at a high availability server that, if all goes well, is going to be the new Wanik editing NAS.
You mean new high availability Wanik?
Yes, that's the name we're gonna go for.
HA Wanik 4.
How do I get these out?
There's like a little...
Oh. Each of these 4 units in here has a 64-core Epic Milan CPU.
Genoa.
Genoa. These are Genoa?
Hell yeah.
What?
So it's like 384 gigs of RAM, 64-core Genoa, 6 U.3 slots in the front for PCIe Gen 5 storage if you want, and then there's 2 little M.2s for boot. And there's 4 of them in this 2U.
Holy crap.
So there's 256 cores.
The idea here is that in the same way that you would run multiple hard drives so that if one fails, the rest of them can just take over, you run multiple servers so that if one fails for whatever reason, the other 3 will just keep on trucking. Now there's a number...
I've always wanted to try a high availability storage setup, but that is a future project.
Of different ways that we can combine the storage of these servers, whether we use something like GlusterFS on TrueNAS Scale, or Ceph, or even WekaFS. Yeah, we were going to use that, weren't we?
We're working on it.
Okay, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe.
We might need a second one of these because Weka apparently needs 8 nodes minimum now. But still, then we could have like 3 of them fail, I think, and still have storage. Which is crazy. The other cool thing is you can update it in the middle of the workday like it's nothing.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah, BIOS update, whatever.
Stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
Shout out Eaton, by the way, for this 9PXM UPS. I think...
This is the same one that's on the other side.
Yeah, did they just send this?
Yeah. They also sent us another 2 PDUs, which is super sick. Dude, the PDUs, those aren't even the final ones. They didn't have stock of the ones I wanted that have individual per port energy monitoring.
No way.
So they were like, oh yeah, you can just have these ones for now, and we'll send those ones when you want it. And they're also providing full cable tray for the entire warehouse. So we can actually run all the Ethernet in like those fancy trays.
So Eaton are just complete bros now.
Yeah.
Man, their stuff is like aced here though.
This is what you want.
Speaking of cable tray, I guess that's the plan for this.
Yeah, the reason that hasn't been cleaned up is we have to run like another 30 or 40 wires, so you might as well just do it all at once.
Got it. We didn't mention this on the other side, but you might have noticed we have these color-coded power cables coming off of our PDUs. That's so that we can ensure that each of our servers is powered by 2 separate PDUs, so that in the event of a PDU failure, it'll still stay running thanks to the redundant power supply.
That's pretty cool using color-coded cables. I'm gonna have to consider that.
Last part of the infrastructure changes are on the client side, specifically for our writers. Ubiquiti hooked up each of them with one of these cool, I think they're called the Switch Flex XG. They're a PoE powered 10 gig switch, but in our case, we're just using wall power. It gives each of our writers 4 10 gig ports and a gigabit port. Obviously,
instead of having those small switches there, I would make a few changes to this. I would try to have home runs directly, so 4 10 gig home runs, and if possible, those can be powered over Ethernet. Have a 5th run, or have a 2nd run for if you are using those as a spoke switch, just in case if the power goes out, it can run off the centralized battery. So having a 10 gig port for data and the 1 gig port for power in.
Obviously, we have test benches and other devices that we're working on, so just having one 10 gig connection to each workstation was a bit of a bottleneck. This way they can plug in a bunch of different devices and
run multiple home runs
and still get that 10 gig speed, which is obviously very important if we need to review footage off the server or what have you. It's pretty sick, and they're not that expensive either. I think it's $299 for one of those. We almost forgot about the network closet that was here when we moved into the lab. The intention for this is for all of these cables to get moved over to the new server room.
Another 4 Ubiquiti switches.
The reason it's still here is these are all the old connections in the warehouse that haven't been redone yet because of that cable tray. So once that's all done, these will probably just get cut out of the wall and recycled, and yeah, there won't really be anything in this closet. We could probably just use it for cleaning products or something like that. And that's pretty much it.
So thanks for watching both the Linus Tech Tips video and this video. I hope to make a lot more exploring my home lab.